So now that we know what a computer network is, let's talk a little bit about the physical components of a network. What do we need to have a network? Well, you need to have hosts. In computer networking terminology, a host is a device that is the originator of data. It's creating the data for the first time, like your laptop is a host when you're creating an email or when you're bringing up a website. So that's one aspect of a host. Another aspect of a host is that it terminates data. In other words, hosts can send data or receive data, but typically a host is not something that data would pass through, right? Normally you don't think of your laptop or your smartphone as being a device where data is going to come into it from somebody else and go out to somebody else. That's not really a host. That's a network infrastructure device that does that. And here we see some common icons here of network hosts. Now these network hosts, whether it be a smartphone or a tablet or a PC, what are some things that they all have in common? Well, they would all have some sort of processor, what we call a CPU, a central processing unit. That's the brain of the device that runs all your applications and that understands all these networking protocols. So that's one thing they all have in common. Another thing is they all have memory, right? You have your memory to store your documents, as well as when you're talking about networking, when ones and zeros are coming in off the wire, they have to be stored somewhere so the processor can retrieve them and look them up. They also have something called NICs, a network interface card. So you should definitely be familiar with that acronym, NIC, a network interface card. So the network interface card is what gives that host physical connectivity to the network. Now, network interface cards come in various shapes and forms. For example, a wired network interface card will have a little plug or a little jack on it that you'll plug a cable into. Okay? But guess what? This smartphone right here, there's a network interface card in the smartphone as well. I don't see any cables plugged into it. Well, that's because the network interface card in here is not designed to connect to a wired network. It's designed to connect to a wireless network using Wi-Fi. So when you're using Wi-Fi on your tablet or your smartphone or whatever, you're using a built-in Wi-Fi NIC card in that device. So if a device does not have some sort of network interface card that understands Wi-Fi, that understands Ethernet, or a variety of other flavors, you have no way of connecting to the network. You are isolated by yourself. And then lastly, a host device also has to have what we call networked applications. What does that mean? Well, within the applications, either on your smartphone or on your laptop or PC, you can divide them into two basic groups. There's non-networked applications, applications that have no idea of what networking is, and networked applications. For example, think of the Notepad applications built into every Windows operating system. Microsoft Notepad is a non-networked application, right? You can bring it up, you can type notes to yourself and little things, but Notepad has no idea that there's an outside world out there. You have no way of, within Notepad itself, there's no drop-down menus or anything to tell Notepad, hey, I want to take this note I just created and send it to this server over here, or send it to this laptop over here. Notepad is not aware of networks, so it's a non-networked application. And I'm sure you can probably think of the opposite. What is a networked application? Microsoft Outlook, Firefox, Chrome, all these things that inherently have networking ability built into them, that were designed to be able to send and receive data to other remote devices. So all those things together are what are the things that make up our hosts. Now, the hosts by themselves, technically speaking, to have a network, all you really need to have are two hosts with some sort of network media in between. For example, I could have two hosts with wired Ethernet network interface cards with a single cable between them, and I've got a network. You don't need switches. You don't need routers and hubs to have a network. A network is simply the bare minimum that you need to get these hosts to communicate. Now, once I have three or more hosts, or if the two hosts that I want to communicate are really far apart from each other, Now I need to have some network infrastructure devices, something that's able to carry that data a little bit farther, or maybe something that's able to give me some security, separate saying, well, I want these two hosts to communicate, but I don't want these two hosts to communicate. Now we need some network infrastructure devices. So, as you can see, some common icons here. We have a hub, and I'll talk more about hubs in a little bit. We have switches. This is a common icon for a wireless or a Wi-Fi access point. And then down here, we have routers and firewalls. Now look at how I've divided this up. I've divided the first three as network access devices and the last two as network infrastructure devices. Why did I do that? Well, these first three devices, the reason I call them network access devices is because hubs, switches, and Wi-Fi access points were designed to be sort of like the first line of defense on the network. In other words, these are the devices that directly connect to your hosts, your laptops, your PCs, your smartphones. These devices here are what give your hosts access to the network. That's why I call them network access devices. And network infrastructure devices, routers and firewalls, typically, not always, but typically you won't find hosts such as laptops and tablets directly connected to a router or a firewall. Routers and firewalls connect to each other. They can connect to these network access devices up here, but typically the hosts themselves, the end users, will not have connections to these. Now I say typically because of course there's always circumstances when that's not the case. You can certainly find networks today where servers are directly connected to a firewall or router, as an example.